Hi, it's Summer, and this is my August wrap up. I read 6 books in August, and I'm just gonna get right into it. I started out August with a reread. It was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I think that I've lost count on how many times I've reread this. It's probably around like 6, 7, or 8 times. I was kind of in a reading slump on and off throughout August, and whenever I'm in a reading slump, I usually kind of tend to go towards a reread because I already know that I'm gonna love it. I don't have to think too hard and try to keep up with new characters and new plot. I already just kind of know what's gonna happen, especially with this book since I've read it so many times. It's just the ultimate comfort read for me. And this time around, I actually listened to the graphic audio. It's available on Scribd. It has a full cast, it has sound effects and music, and it was a really fun way to experience the story. This is a 5-star book for me. I don't see it ever going below 5 stars. It was a really fun way to start out the month though, and kind of helped me get through a reading slump. After that, I read Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel to Ninth House, which I loved. Was so obsessed with it. Even though it was a little bit confusing and hard to keep track of everything, I really enjoyed it. This one was confusing and hard to keep track of, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. I gave it 3 stars, so I just liked it. It was just okay, which makes me so sad because I was so excited to read this. On Goodreads, all I said for this one was I was really confused for most of this, even after watching a spoiler recap of the first book. It was fun at times, but for the most part, it was just okay. I would say if you're going to go into this series, you really need to keep a character list and also a list of like all of the different houses and what they each do. It'll make it a lot easier to understand, and I wish that that's what I would have done. After that, I read The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. I really loved this book. In my review, I said it might be closer to a 4.5, but honestly, now that I've had time away from it, I think it's a 5. For this one, I said if you mixed together The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, The Wishing Game, and House of Hunger, you would get this book. It's just like a perfect mashup of all of those. Also, Kayla from Books and Lala described this as Miss Honey from Matilda, but she's a vampire, and that's what immediately sold me and made me pick up the book. I definitely agree with that description. I loved the writing and how the pacing felt like a slow burn. I also loved the multiple timelines. The main problem that I had with this one was that there was quite a bit of brutal animal death, but I should have expected that with a vampire book. Just be really careful going into it if that's something that you're also sensitive to. The synopsis for this book on Goodreads says that it's their first novel, which I didn't know, and that's amazing because it's so good. It says it's a story of love, family, history, and myth as seen through the eyes of one immortal woman, Colette. She's a lonely artist who has an elite fine art school for children in upstate New York. So the present timeline is her being a teacher for all of these kids, and there's one kid in particular that she's really close to and kind of gets wrapped up in his family, like home life a little bit. But then we're also getting flashbacks to her whole entire life, starting all the way back, I think, in the early 1800s. She's a vampire, so you get to see her whole entire like kind of transformation, coming to terms with being a vampire, all of the friends and found family that she has throughout the years, all of the hardships she goes through. And that's definitely where it kind of feels like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. You're just following her throughout history and all of these like major things in history that have happened. The Wishing Game aspect comes in with her special connection to this young boy in her class, because it's kind of the same thing in The Wishing Game. And then House of Hunger kind of comes in because it has vampire vibes, she's a vampire, all of that kind of stuff. But Colette definitely has a lot of humanity and like love for people, and her lust for blood is just kind of something that she like puts up with. And I feel like you really get to know her in this book just with like literally seeing her whole entire life. I also really like the title of this one and how it kind of comes into play in the book and the plot. If you're a fan of like slow burn gothic horror with found family and vampires, this is definitely one for you. I don't think this one is for everyone, but I think the people that it is for will just love it. After that, I read The Book Eaters. This one is by Soon Yi Dean. I actually buddy read this one with my friend Lindsay. I'll put her Instagram link in the description. We sent voice memos to each other every night after reading that day's chapters, and it was just perfect. It was so much fun to read this with her. I just really enjoyed our conversation around this book. I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm pretty sure that she did too, so we both really enjoyed it. This one is about a society called the Book Eaters. They're not humans, but they look like humans, and they eat books instead of actual food. And whatever books they eat, they absorb the knowledge and the text from that book. So for example, if you wanted to learn how to speak another language as a book eater, all you'd have to do is eat a book teaching you about French or something, and then you'd be able to speak French after. Super interesting concept. This book was so unique. I've never read anything like it. Also within this society though are mind eaters. They're a lot less common than book eaters, but every once in a while there will be a mind eater that's born, and like their name entails, instead of eating books, they eat the minds of people. And when they eat someone's mind, they gain all of that person's memories and knowledge from their life. And pretty much all of the mind eaters are used as like weapons by the higher ups in this society. They're not really treated very well. Book eater women also aren't treated well at all. I don't want to go into too much detail though, because I had a fun time. Well, not a fun time, but it was interesting to have information about the book eaters kind of slowly given to you throughout the book, and you slowly kind of understand how their society works and stuff like that. So I don't want to spoil that. This follows the main character Devon and her son, and they're kind of on the run from the book eaters. For this one on Goodreads, I said this was such a thought-provoking creative book. At the end of the audiobook, there's an interview with the author where she says that the idea of this book came from wanting to make an original / never been done vampire story, and I just really love that. This book made me feel so many emotions, and I loved how the pacing was and how / when the book gave us new information. Such a fun one, and I loved reading it with my friend Lindsay. I kind of forgot that there was that author interview at the end. It was an interview between the author and the narrator of the audiobook. Both of them are autistic, which I thought was really cool, and I didn't know that before going in. But it was a really cool interview. I feel like it just gives you so much insight into like the writing process and the ideas behind the book. It's so worth a listen if you get a chance to. I was reading this one at the same time as The God of Endings, and I kept thinking to myself, I was like, these are both kind of like giving vampire vibes, even though these people aren't vampires. So it was very validating to hear the author say in that interview that this basically is a vampire story. It's just a super original one. Also, it's blurbed by V.E. Schwab and Shannon McGuire, and I feel like if you're a fan of those two authors, you'll definitely like this one. I'm so glad that I read this one, and it would be a perfect book to read during this time of the year, so you should go pick it up. All right, and these last two books I read for the back to school readathon that was hosted by my friend Gwen. I wish that I had a vlog for this readathon to direct you to, but I lost like 80% of my footage, which sucks. I think that's the first time that that's happened to me. Just know that I had the best time during the readathon. It was so much fun. So the first book that I read for the readathon was The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon. I gave this one 3.5 stars. In this one, we're following Jax and her sister, Lexi. It says, when Jax receives 9 missed calls from her older sister, Lexi, she assumes that it's just another of her sister's episodes. Manic and increasingly out of touch with reality, Lexi has pushed Jax away for over a year. But the next day, Lexi is dead, drowned in a pool at their grandmother's estate. So Jax flies back to her grandmother's house to kind of like deal with funeral stuff. And she also kind of starts to uncover like family secrets a little bit while she's there. And all of the secrets kind of revolve around this pool in the backyard. There's also a second perspective though, and it's set in 1929. 37-year-old newlywed Ethel Monroe hopes desperately for a baby. In an effort to distract her, her husband whisks her away on a trip to Vermont, where a natural spring is showcased by the newest and most modern hotel in the Northeast. Once there, Ethel learns that the water is rumored to grant wishes, never suspecting that the spring takes in equal measure to what it gives. So the premise sounds so good, but I only just kind of liked this one. I said this was definitely eerie and atmospheric, but I was hoping for more. It didn't get as scary as I was hoping. I wanted something on the same level as The Winter People by the same author. It was still an entertaining read though. I think this one is worth the read if you like the author already. Definitely look into trigger warnings for this one though. I would say the main ones are obviously death, themes of infertility, self-harm, and there's also a lot of talk about like mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder. I can't speak to the representation. I need to find some reviews from people that have bipolar disorder. I'm sure that the experiences from person to person are going to be so different, but that might be something to be aware of before going into the book. So yeah, 3.5 stars. I liked it. And then the last book that I read for August was The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag. It's a really cute graphic novel. It's queer middle grade and it's so wholesome. This one follows Morgan. She's 15 and she cannot wait to grow up and graduate and be able to get out of her small town. It says one night she is saved from drowning by a mysterious girl named Kelty. Suddenly life on the island doesn't feel so stifling anymore. It's a really sweet queer coming of age story, and it also has themes of like eco-consciousness, being kind to the ocean. It was so sweet and a solid 4-star read for me. Those are all the books that I read in August though. It was kind of a weird reading month for me, but I'm so glad that I had at least a few really good ones on this list. My favorite one was definitely The God of Endings. Let me know in the comments if you read any of the same books as me, what your favorite book that you read in August was. If you made it to the end of the video, you can also leave a sun emoji in the comments. I also wanted to give a shout out to my Blossom besties. If you also want to become a Blossom bestie, the info for my Patreon is in the description. Thank you so much for watching though, and I will see you in the next one.